Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. We're going to dive into the discussion of what are looking like the best Battleground Blitz specializations for Season 2, because it's been some time since we really talked about Battleground Blitz and what was going on with the meta, because we saw a huge amount of changes just at the initial front end of this patch, and then now, obviously, with these massive kind of upheaval of changes that has come through for this most recent reset. I think it's important that we start talking about it, and if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. So let's take a look here at the melee DPS first, because I know a lot of you probably are playing the melee DPS. You want to know which Zuggers are going to be the best options for you. And when we look at the breakdown of the representation for the melee DPS, you'll see that there is a wide variety of specializations kind of ping-ponging and yo-yoing up and down as far as viability. And we can see currently at the top that Arms Warrior is starting to skyrocket. Arms Warrior stocks are going straight to the moon, and I think this is mostly attributed to the fact that you can get monstrously high critical strikes at the moment with Mortal Strike and with Demolish likely. And you're able to just get like 100-0 combos, which is really good for Arms Warrior in team fight situations, and you could probably overpower a lot of healers now in a lot of fights, especially with the most recent changes to bring healing down on top of that. So I'm not really surprised. I also think a lot of people find Arms Warrior just really fun and enjoyable. It's a nice specialization for a beginner to an advanced level player, so it's got a much more broad player base that wants to access it as far as like fantasy of the specialization. So definitely viability and the structure around it being beginner friendly, I think, is making this spec kind of rise above everybody else. Ret Paladin is holding in at the number 2 position at 14% in terms of representation. I don't think this is surprising in Battlegrounds either, because Retribution Paladins have some of the best, if not the best, 1 versus 1 in the game, and in a lot of Battleground Blitz maps, 1v1 is actually most of the matchup. So being the best 1v1 spec is going to give you a huge edge there. And they also have really decent kind of like pad team fight damage. They can do, upwards of some of the best team fight classes in the game in terms of overall damage, and they have great utility to protect their flag carrier with things like Freedom and Sanctuary to get them out of stuns and get them across the map, which is a lot more vital and important now that monks aren't able to use their portal while holding the flag. So I don't think this is surprising to see Retribution Paladin at this position for Battleground Blitz, even despite its power in Arena. Fury Warrior is still holding strong, although it's dropped a bit from where it is, and I think it's mostly just Fury Warriors re-rolling to Arms to try and give it a go, and I don't think this is indicative that Fury is unviable. Fury does remarkably high sustained damage now, and I can only imagine that it's doing even better with the change that they've made to Battleground Blitz that has brought lower overall healing. It's 1v1. I don't think it's particularly great. I think you do lose to the Rogues and to the Ret Paladins, but in teamfight situations, Fury Warrior, Arms Warrior, you guys are bringing the best Mortal Strike effects to those engagements. You have really good disruption, and you have really good ability to basically just be able to kill a healer, which is important in those situations. So I don't think it's surprising to see Fury up here, and I also think, much like Arms, it's just more beginner friendly, similar to Ret, more beginner friendly than those of the Rogue specializations, because when we see Rogue specializations, the representation is actually pretty low. We have to track back a little bit for Frost Decay. I don't know what's going on with the Frost Decay data. Seems like it's not completely up to date to the most recent weeks here. I would imagine that you're still really good because Chains of Ice, basically. If you're a Death Knight player, Chains of Ice is always going to be valuable. Death Grip is always going to be valuable. You can completely displace the fight and carry the game. So if you want to feel like you're having an integral role in the match, then Death Knight is obviously going to be able to deliver that. And you're going to contribute a lot of value as well in teamfight situations to pull targets into more advantageous positions. It's always going to be the case. I would expect that Frost is going to be a bit more preferential than Unholy, because you have more burst, more 100-0 damage. You can grip healers in together, stun, combo chain them together, and kind of rock and roll in that sense. So I would think that Frost is going to be slightly better, and Unholy doesn't really have a particularly great niche at the moment in PvP in general, so I would expect Frost to outperform it, but it's kind of looks like it's riding through the middle of everything towards the middle top end. Havoc Demon Hunter we've seen fall off a cliff, and I don't know if these are like the re-rollers to justify this drop-off. They all re-rolled Arms Warrior instead, or if Havoc is in some trouble. It's still, again, above a majority of the specializations and still at a very healthy margin. And when we look at the win rate in a second, we'll be able to confirm that or not. I would think that Demon Hunter is still a really good specialization. It's got really good 1 versus 1, again, much like Ret Paladin. It's really good team fight, has really good utility, stun locks, and team defensive cooldowns. I would find it really hard to believe that Demon Hunter isn't a good Battleground Blitz spec, and that's likely indicative here of the data. Still coming in at kind of the middle of the pack. We do see Unholy kind of on his heels. And again, Death Grip and Chains of Ice mostly is the name of the game there. But I would think Unholy doesn't contribute a lot other than that. Feral Druid's representation is actually pretty low at 6.23%. Feral Druid was actually really good in the previous season of Battleground Blitz because, again, 1 versus 1. That's something, a quality that you want to have if you're going to be doing really well in Battleground Blitz, because most of the maps have strong 1v1 situations. But it could also be really good as an assassin to be able to take out flag carriers, having stealth, sneaking in with Incarn, getting on top of them, and looking for kind of like KO damage in that regard. And you still have Cyclone, which is the most powerful crowd control in Battleground Blitz. But I'm kind of surprised to see it down here at 6.23. I would have expected it to be a little bit higher, especially given its 1v1 potential. Maybe it's just people got bored of Feral. They wanted to try some of the other specs, especially some of the buffs and maybe some of the set bonuses that are making other classes a lot more awesome this patch. But it's not like it's bad. But you can definitely say that it's been on a bit of a roller coaster. Fell off really big at the start, then kind of came back in, and it hasn't really settled itself as far as what's going to be the most meta. Windwalker holding in at 6 as well, just a really decent pick. You have really good one-shot potential at the moment, really strong 1v1. That's always going to be really valuable in Battleground Blitz. Might be a bit more awkward maybe in team fight situations, in like getting to your target, I think, than a lot of other melee DPS at the moment. If you're getting constantly snared or root procced over and over, I could see that being more difficult on Windwalker. But it's got to have really good 1v1 potential, I would imagine, and it's got to have really good team fight. I think it can still contribute a lot in that regard. I guess some of the downsides is that it stuns a really long cooldown. Its end cap is not really insane in PvP situations, especially in Battleground Blitz with like large scale targets. I think it's mostly 1v1 that's probably carrying it. That's why we went on a bit of a swing, right? Like, oh my god, look all the gigabuffs Windwalker got. We could see the patch happen, and then it's kind of fallen off a bit since then. But I don't think it's completely unviable. It's definitely still going to be a solid option. Assassination Rogue remains the number 1 rogue spec at the moment. I think it's mostly because it's easier to play, and it's just going to give you value in team fights. But I think when it comes down to 1v1, that subtlety is never going to be beaten by Outlaw or by Assassination. And maybe Subtlety's team fight has gone down now that it doesn't have shadowy duels. So Assassination getting AoE team Garrotes still has okay 1v1. It's not like its 1v1 is entirely useless. But I would say that Subtlety has a stronger 1v1, but just being able to do more overall damage, contribute more to the team fight. Also, given the fact that Outlaw can't do the grappling hook fast caps anymore on maps, which was a reason to bring Outlaw over Assassin, is likely why we see Outlaw Subtlety trending lower than Assassination, but isn't to say that you can't play it. And yeah, Subtlety is actually the number 2 spec. Usually Outlaw is actually above it. So Outlaw has fallen off a lot more, I think, given the initial meta changes that have come through for this patch. But Subtlety's still at 4.6, and I think it's not indicative that it's weak with this representation. It's just that it's more complicated to play and execute on, but it has as close to the best 1v1 as Ret, but it's not as simple, and that's why we see Ret like up here at 14 and Subtlety only at 4.6. I would think it's likely because its team fight isn't as straightforward. Ret just kind of runs in and button bashes. If you go into the team fight and button bash as a Subtlety rogue, you're not coming out of that alive. You have to be a lot more precise, a lot more tactical with those types of engagements. But Smoke Bomb's always going to be a valuable tool. You're always going to be the best class at taking out flag carriers, the best class at disrupting enemies, at getting back to your flag carrier. So yeah, Subtlety Rogue is a really good pick at the moment. Enhanced trending towards down at the bottom in Outlaw and Survival Hunter. As far as melee, you guys are all like within like 0.5% of each other at the moment. You guys, well, at least Enhancement and Survival, you're kind of limited mobility. It's hard to get onto targets. You don't have the best stuns or lockdown. 1v1 might be okay for Enhance, but you don't have like any immunities. Searing Glare is also something we should have talked about with Red, being able to cap bases by Hammer Justice capping, Blinding Light capping, or Searing Glare capping. Enhance doesn't really have any of those, so you don't really have any tools to like Ninja cap a base. You don't have any immunities. It's hard for you to connect to targets. Like I was saying, it could be an issue with Windwalker. That's really going to be a problem as Enhance or as Survival. So I think like mobility and lockdown and capping potential are the issues with Survival and Enhance at the moment. That's why the representation is a little bit lower. It'll be harder for me to recommend them as far as like if you want to be the most competitive option. And then Outlaw Rogue, I think since it's lost the ability to fast cap, It's just it doesn't have as good of 1v1 as Subtlety. It doesn't have the same kind of pressure or AoE crowd control that Assassination brings. So it's just kind of just weaker in that sense. It doesn't have like that cheeky reason that you're really bringing it in or locking it in. So it's probably going to keep trending down, I would imagine, from where it is currently at Battleground Blitz. When we look at win rates, Arms Warrior's win rate actually fell after it got buffed by 13%. It's probably because everyone fought him reroller is not very good at it, and then they brought the win rate down. Unholy's win rate has also gone down, even despite buffs coming through. And so we can see that there's definitely some type of weakness there, and even with Chains of Ice and with Death Grip, there is definitely still some type of weakness. Outlaw's win rate, that's an ouch. Oh, wait, it went from a 100% win rate. People had a 100. This has got to be not 100% accurate. There's no way it dropped 51% in the most recent. Unless this guy was a win trader and then got really unlucky or something. There's no way that has to be. This has to be a glitch there. Survival Hunter actually holds a very strong win rate. So those Survival Hunters that are sticking around are definitely very talented players, very skilled players, and even despite the limitations of their specialization, are still actually finding ways to make it work. Maybe it's possible that the buffs through to Survival have given you a little bit of a bump, and maybe I'm underestimating the spec. That could definitely be the case. Demon Hunter win rate actually coming down a lot from 62 to 52, but still, again, if you're above 50, you're definitely happy with that. Feral's win rate has gone up, even despite its representation still kind of being, on the mid level. Red Paladin win rate actually went down since getting buffed by 8%. Again, I don't know if Fought and Rerollers probably bringing it down a bit. Windwalkers have felt the bite a lot, though, dropping down 12.99% from 60 to 47%. Frost is below 50%, so DK in general, even with the best tools, in my opinion, some of the best tools, at least Death Grip and Chains, your win rates are actually not representative of that. Fury Warriors win rate coming down a little bit here as well, even despite no changes to Fury. Enhance below 50 again, so it kind of makes sense with the representation going down a little bit with them there. Subtlety actually getting a big jump in win rate, so players likely having to figure out how to play around with Subtlety again, not having Shadowy Duel and kind of learning some of the new mechanics with it. And Assassination's win rate has gone down a bit, but it's still holding in kind of like that mid-range pack. So in general, you can make every specialization work. These three towards the bottom are going to be a little bit more difficult, but you can make them work. And almost every single melee has like some reason to be bringing it to the engagement, which is good. When we look at ranged, we can see a lot of roller coasters of Marksmanship Hunter, and Marksmanship Hunter still holding at the top, and it's just because it can KO people 100-0 really fast, which is really important, especially when healers are so valuable. If you can just snipe off a DPS and now you're at a player count advantage, it's really good. They also have really good flag carry defense with flare and traps and preventing creating these gauntlets to get to the base. They have really good base defending in general. 1v1 is not bad. I think 1v1 might actually be the best as Marksmanship Hunter, so it's also another reason why it's likely here at the top. So Marksmanship Hunter is a really good go-to for Battleground Blitz at the moment. Boomkin's been on an uptick as well, and again, it's really good team fight. Cyclone is really abusable as Boomkin as opposed to Pharaoh because you don't need to be in melee range. You can stay at a kind of a safe distance, and you can control multiple healers at the same time, which is super underrated. You can Solar Beam one healer and then Cyclone the other healer, bash out of the Solar Beam, and you can take both healers out by yourself. Which is really valuable. And you've got really good burst damage now as well, like Marksmanship Hunter being able to crack players, and you can sneak in with stealth towards enemy flag carriers. So it's not surprising to me, although I do think that Boomkin's 1v1 is not spectacular. So there are some maps where you will feel noticeably weaker, like Deep Wind Gorge, in Arathi Basin. Those maps where 1v1 is more of what's attributing the likelihood to winning, you'll feel weaker. But even despite that, Boomkin actually has really strong representation. Frost Mage it's fallen off a bit, but it's still holding solid at 10%. It's got really good AoE snares, just a lot of instant cast damage and really good 1v1, so I don't think it's surprising. Ice Wall is probably one of the best ranged DPS abilities in the game, coming from Mage, being able to wall, cap a base, wall off healers, line of sight them, like this just guaranteed crowd control that's effectively AoE is just really good. Shadow Priest still holding in the middle, again, just really good overall damage. Nice Psy-Fiend kind of execute power. It likely has really good 1v1, I would imagine, from my experience playing in an arena, but not so much in Battleground Blitz. I would think it has a really good 1v1, so solid 1v1, solid overall teamfight damage, really durable and tanky. So definitely a strong pick for ranged. Affliction Warlock, it seems to be trending, at least for now, at the number 1 position with Destro on its heels or maybe slightly above it. The data's kind of skewed a little bit. I would think that Destro is slightly better just because, again, much like Marksman, it's got stronger execute power, which is really important. If you can just close out a player and get them out of the fight, you're at a way bigger advantage than kind of padding the meter where heal over time effects are healing through your damage like Affliction. So I would actually think that Destro is a better option with Chaos Bolt than Affliction would be my personal recommendation, but obviously they're very close. You can make them both work. So Affliction might have a stronger overall team fight, so some maps will be more preferential to it. But Destro could have more hard carry potential, but more volatility, because if you're shut down and unable to get that explosive damage out, then you won't contribute anything, whereas Affliction will be contributing something. So there's going to be an exchange and a trade-off there between those Warlock specs. Beast Mastery Hunter, just strong sustain, really good base defending. I would imagine has at least decent 1v1. Maybe not as good as Marksman because its burst damage isn't there, but sustained damage can definitely carry. Diamond Ice Trap, still a really effective tool, and again, really good flag carry defense with flare and snare and root traps and things like that on Warsong Gulch. And honestly, like, flag carry defense is more important now because Mistweavers can't port with the flag. So Beastmaster Hunter still going to be a better pick, it looks like, than Survival, at least overall. Devastation Evoker, towards the bottom end, we're getting kind of down here. Demo is kind of maybe don't play Demo if Devastation is doing a bit better than them here in this position. Arcane is still good. I think it's still a really good assassin spec, kind of just a KO, but a bit harder to play than Frost because it's not as much instant cast damage, so you can be disrupted more. It's kind of the volatility of Destro, where if you get interrupted, you're not doing too much. And Elemental Shaman, I think is going to be doing a lot better. I think Ellie's going to be on the uptick because it's getting a lot more explosive damage as opposed to kind of just tickle attacks, especially with my most recent experience playing it. I think Primordial Wave is able to do a lot of you could be a lot of team wave fight damage there with a Magma Totem into a Primordial Wave. You could probably just melt a lot of players really quickly. So Elemental is kind of the underdog, dark horse that could definitely take over the ladder. Devastation, it's a little bit more limited. You got to get really close to the engagement, and I would imagine you get just completely shut down by rogues, which could be tough. So maybe not the best 1v1, maybe not the most insane team fight, and that's why we see it a little bit lower. But Demo, just not able to offer too much. It's really easy to disrupt all of the pets. You have to hard cast a lot. You're very stationary. It's hard to move around, and on a lot of maps, movement is really important. So I don't see that as too surprising to see Demonology down here. Fire Mage, you guys just get nerfed when you're not even really that good. Frost does more instant damage than you and has snares. Arcane has more threatening burst damage. So it's not just really a lot of reason to bring you, which is why I think we see Fire towards the bottom. Boomkin's win rate, although, has fallen off quite a bit here. Enhance has picked up a bit. Win rates are down across the board. Maybe this is just as more players get in. And whenever I see these 100% win rates, this is the most sketchy. Either the data is flawed or there's some sketchy stuff going on in Battleground Blitz or something like that. Demo's win rate has come down quite a lot here. Shadows is still holding above 50. AUG is below 50 now. So a little bit of a rougher ride as far as range DPS. It does seem like melee DPS are having a little bit more of a consistent time. And likely because most of these range DPS rely on a lot of volatility in their damage, and their 1v1 isn't as strong as a lot of the melee DPS, is likely attributing to that significantly. For healers, Disc Priest, man, you're on a roller coaster going down. You guys are riding high, bro, riding high. We could see Monk trying to make a resurgence, but after those port nerfs, they definitely put them more in line with the other healers. And now with some of the tuning adjustments, Disc is falling down. We could see Holy starting to go up, Rest of Shaman starting to go up. So the healer balance is actually starting to make a convergence in Battleground Blitz. I think Disc is still providing a lot of good overall team utility and value. It's just strong output, but its mobility is limited, and that's going to be a big weakness for it. Monk is still just a really good, phenomenal healer, and now without the port shenanigans, at least it's mortal and it can at least bleed. So I think it's honestly put it into just a healthy position when it comes to Battleground Blitz. Rest of Shaman's doing, I'd say, surprisingly well, because it's been okay, especially with things like Stagfield. And I could have also talked about things like Swoop with Evokers, being able to pull targets to edges and stuff like that can actually be really good. Maybe it's a reason Devastation even has any representation in the range DPS, but it's another reason to bring Prez. The rest of Shaman has a lot of knockbacks as well. It seems like its overall throughput is definitely putting it into a much more competitive position here for Season 2. And then Holy Priest with the uptick of buffs. Like, it just got so many buffs that I just feel like it's not surprising to see way more people playing it now than we've seen before. So it's just on the heels of Resto Shaman. Is it better than Disc? I think that's kind of a wait and see. I think mobility could be an issue for it as well. Things like Resto Druid's representation is still so low. And I feel like a lot of the changes were almost targeted at Resto Druid in Battleground Blitz to try and help it and lift some of its representation of it. It's still kind of low here, at least 6%. It's not, it's not abysmal, right? We've seen some specs at 3% or lower, which seems to be rough. 6% is still decent. So the healer changes have definitely caused a lot of chaos when it comes to healer balance and healer tuning, as far as like which healers are the best, which is good, because then hopefully you'll be able to play the spec that you want to play and not feel like, man, I got queued into the Disc Priest and I'm not playing a Disc Priest, I have no chance, right? Because that's just going to lead to healers quitting the game. So this is looking good and looking healthy overall. I do think there are reasons to bring every healer. Maybe it's just an overall throughput issue with Resto Druid, at least when it comes to Battleground Blitz, because you have some of the best tools, right? Like Cyclone. So you would expect Resto Druid to be doing a little bit better, and you have some of the best mobility also. But even despite that, Shaman and Holy Priest are starting to climb much more above you, and even with the portal removal for Mistweaver Monk, they're still holding at a much more solid value than that of Druid or Prez. So there might need to be a little bit of an adjustment there to bring them up, to try and bring them more onto parity. But win rates look decent, except maybe Prez, you're dropping below 50%. It's a little bit rough there. But obviously you're looking for the healthy margin is like somewhere in and around 50%, preferably above it. Holy Paladin definitely is enjoying these buffs, and Holy Paladin was so blended in that I didn't even see it there. So Holy Paladin, it looks like the data doesn't update 100%. Looks like it might be held back. That's why we didn't see it towards the end. But with Holy Paladin's win rate going up like this, and the buffs to Eternal Flame and your tankiness, you can't maybe just get run down like previously. I would think that Holy Paladin is also in a much better place. So healers, I don't think you can really go wrong. Maybe Druid and Paladin are a little bit on the weaker side. I think Prez has really good tools that can carry it in a lot of situations. But it seems like Battleground Blitz meta overall is at least a little bit better than it was last season, and there's a lot more variety. So I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. I hope it's got you thinking about what you want to be playing or what you want to be checking out, what's going to be looking like a bit more of a viable option. If you want to make sure you're staying up to date, once again, make sure to smash that subscribe button. Thank you guys very much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.